So this is about, how many of you have read Post Oaks and Sand Roughs? Okay, so I'm going to do a little bit of summary. I guess the goal of my presentation is to get you to read that novel if you haven't read it, because I think it's extremely important. And my slogan is that it's not just a curio that maybe we should look at for like autobiographical reasons, but it's like an autonomous work of art itself. And this, the failings and ambitions of such strugglers as himself is, it's a quote from the novel, and I think the major theme is, somebody who's kind of disenfranchised, living in a rural area, who has artistic sensibilities and wants to become an artist, and they already have the cards stacked against them because you don't live in, the metropolitan areas, you don't live in New York or Chicago where all the presses are, blah, blah, blah. There's this idea that, if you guys are familiar with Lovecraft's biography, when he wanted to become a serious writer, he moved to New York, right? All these writers, they moved to, the certain places, and I think this kind of the way that one is geographically marginalized as an artist, as a writer, is kind of one of the major themes of this awesome novel. Okay, so let's see. Post Oaks and Sand Roughs was written by Howard before circa 1929. It is a fictionalization and artful narration of Howard's life. I know it's hard because we know so much about Howard, but Steve Costigan is not Robert E. Howard. I know that they look very similar, right? Robert E. Howard might even play Steve Costigan in the movie if they turned it into a movie, but they're not the same person. It's really hard to kind of keep that in mind. But I think some really interesting things start to happen when you realize they're not the same person. For example, does anybody know what happens at the end of the novel? What does Steve Costigan do?
Goes on to travel like a
yeah. He gets the heck out of Lost Plains. Howard didn't do that. We know how Howard. So I think that's an extremely important difference. It was never published. I just learned this from Patrice last night. So they're missing the first 39 pages. So it starts in a football game, and there were some scenes before that, and we don't have them. I actually like the fragmentary quality of the novel. So I guess I've already touched this point. I'm less concerned with Howard as a Post Oaks and Sand Roughs for its autobiographical elements, what it can shed on Howard's actual life. I'm more interested in it as just a work of art on its own. So long story short, this is from M.H. Abrams. He's a literary critic. He studied the history of the criticism of kind of romantic poetry, and he was so annoyed because he thought that people like Lord Byron and Shelley and Keats. He was annoyed by the kind of the approach to romanticism, because it seemed like these were really powerful personalities, right? It seemed like literary critics weren't talking about the poetry. They were more interested in the personalities that kind of overshadowed the poetry. So M.H. Abrams put kind of in his book, The Mirror and the Lamp, he's saying to literary critics in the 50s, he's saying, look at all these things that are pulling you away from the beautiful work of art, universe, which is history and, sociology and, the French Revolution, or the artist, all you really want to study is Lord Byron's life and, all that stuff. Or the audience, you want to study how John Keats was a kind of a Cockney poet. He was really given short shrift by all of the critics in Britain. And he's like, no, stop writing about that stuff. You should write about, you should focus on the work if you call yourself a literary critic. I think that can be I think there's wonderful things that you can do talking about the work in context, and you have to, but I think we're at this point, at least in my discipline, that we need a corrective to just look at the work, spend some time talking about literature, not history and biography. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. I'm just saying that that's what I'm interested in. Okay, so if you read the novel, you know that the plot is. This is a horrible slide, by the way. I'm violating every principle of good PowerPoints right now. Really meandering plot. A whole bunch of stuff happens. A whole bunch of stuff. And I've read this novel several times, and I've been tweaking this summary of it for a while, and it leaves out all sorts of crazy things. But here's the summary, and I'm going to read it because it gives you a sense of the novel. All right, so Steve Costigan, not R.H., inspiring poet and writer, attends college in Redwood. He drops out and gets several jobs but quits them. Meanwhile, he writes when he can. He's always at work because he needs to make a living, while also maintaining a local circle of artistically nourishing relationships. All of his friends are kind of aspiring writers too, or at least they're intellectual. He can't keep a job and also fails to support himself with writing. And so he returns to school and finishes college. I actually don't think Howard finished college, did he? He didn't finish. Yeah, but he did?
Yeah.
Oh, he took the finished course. Okay. But he didn't get like a,
2 years.
And he finishes college. So after college, he returns to Lost Plains and attacks writing with renewed energy, but he becomes discouraged through a paucity of success. His final artistic effort is a realistic novel that, unlike his previous sensationalized works, and they're all basically, veiled Robert E. Howard, weird tale stories, will be a realistic account of his life. This fictional novel doesn't sell, and so he takes a job at an office. On the first day of his work, after he's finally decided he's going to stop this writing stuff, he assaults his boss. So he beats him up. At the conclusion of the novel, he's sitting on a hill with his friends who are also aspiring artists who've pretty much failed as artists, and he's ruminating about how every one of his friends, like a whole generation, has just kind of given up hope and went into these sort of gray American standard lives. And then this is a really interesting thing. He leaves Cross Plains. He gets on a bus and goes away. So first off, this is a really strange novel. Why? Because he violates the first principle of novel writing, which is you never know what the conflict is until the very end, right? You don't even you're just kind of following along and going through all these episodes, but he doesn't really articulate the problem until the very end, and it's an artistic problem, right? We think of pulp writers as not really being interested in technique, and I'm not Howard, but there's a stereotype of the hack, who's just pounding out manuscripts and sending them off so they can make money. This pseudo-autobiographical novel that features a character, Steve Costigan. What he's struggling with is an artistic problem. This is the problem. I'm sorry if I'm talking real fast because I'm keeping an eye on the clock and I don't want to test your patience. How much time do I have, by the way?
You're okay. Keep going.
Okay, I'm at 10 minutes.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay.
Another 5 or 10.
5? Okay.
We got a little extra time.
Okay. You sure? Okay. I can shut up if you guys want to. You don't have to.
You're good.
It's not. I'm used to having students who are a captive audience, and usually if students get up, I just stare at them, and then, we'll wait till you come back. There's nothing will stop students from leaving your class without saying, "I'll wait till you come back," and then they're like, teacher. So here's the conflict of the novel that doesn't come until the very end. He's just finished college. He comes back to Lost Plains. He doesn't know what to do with his life, so he saw no logical end to his life. This is Steve Costigan, not Howard. He saw no logical end to his life. He could not go on forever pounding out stuff no one would buy, and the thought of going to work nauseated him. He looked about desperately for some escape. So where does he turn to? He turns to the typewriter. He determined to write a tale of his own life, seeking to instill an entrance therein by a realistic account of the drabness and sham of small-town life, the futile and abortive gropings of humanity, and the failings and ambitions of such strugglers as himself. At first it seemed easy. He thought all that was necessary was simply to write occurrences. Then he found translating realism, or even writing it, was the hardest of all feats. So this conflict, this artistic problem, is actually resolved in the novel, and it's really, I guess resolved is not the right word. It's not resolved, he fails. He says that I can't do it. I can't translate realism into a novel form, and he kind of gives up and he gets a job. So here's the so-called resolution, which is, I think the resolution is his failure of this problem. I think it's a glorious failure, by the way. I'm not criticizing the novel. I think it's amazing, right? This is a beautiful novel, and his failure actually, as somebody who studied the history of kind of 19th century realism, to see this, not R.E.H., Steve Costigan struggling to do this and coming to these really amazing conclusions, it's just, it made my hackles raise. So The book was rejected, and Steve was neither surprised nor very disappointed. He had enough artistic sense to know that his work had violated all the rules of literature. The next morning he rose early, put on a tie, which was a practice he hated, brushed his hair, and dolled himself up dreaming. So he goes to work and he meets his boss. The youth grinned savagely and smashed his right fist into the flabby, bloody face again and again, holding the sagging figure erect and helpless. The features disappeared and the hideous red disfiguration, and the body hung limp and without consciousness before Steve flung his victim to the floor. Steve Costigan, not Robert E. Howard, okay? Important distinction. I don't think Howard, I have no belief that he would do this to a person who would just meet a mean boss. He might want to think about it and fantasize about it, but he wouldn't do it, I think this is why we should keep this in mind. So, but that's not the only conflict. There are minor conflicts, supplementary conflicts. He struggles with, first off, it's kind of a Künstlerroman artist novel. He struggles to hone his craft and become a professional writer. Can't find a job. He's always trying different jobs. The best one is when he's a geological surveyist. It's just, he carries around a stick in the scorching desert from one place to the next, and that's all he does. It sounds like the most boring job ever. His troubled relationships with his artistic friends, they kind of try to play a joke on him with a girl named Gloria. Doesn't work out. And then his increasing alienation from his community and friends. So I'll speak through this. So the whole novel dramatizes, tells the story of Steve Costigan trying to solve this problem of writing about his life in this town of Lost Plains. And technically speaking, as a writer, really being a true committed writer, I really want to get this right. I want to really get the reader to experience my hometown. I think the character of Steve Costigan is just totally trying to do it. So here's what he says, why it's such a difficult thing to do. Steve had wished to write life as he saw it. He had tortuously pounded out a few realistic tales and had found the subject the most difficult of all. I don't know where to take hold, he said slowly. He's talking to his friend, a poet. I don't know where to take hold, he said slowly. Life is full of tag-ins which never begin and never end. There's no plot, no sequence, no moral. But that doesn't mean he doesn't try. He searches for a plot, he searches for a principle of sequencing and moral. And in the course of doing this, he does what any good genre writer does. He tries out different genres. Actually, a lot of what Mark talked about is this idea of genre hybridity, and he will combine genres and bring them together. I think he's doing this in an attempt to kind of render reality. It's a really hard thing to do. With not so much with film. With film you can really bring reality home, but with writing it's hard to get people to have a visceral experience of the real. So and I'm sure there are more. I've identified so many different genres in post-docs and sans-serifs. And I'm just going to go through real quick. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on each one of these. And there are established critical discussions about each one of these genres that I think this novel participates in. We have the Bildungsroman, or more specifically the Künstlerroman, which is the artist. Am I saying that right, Dirk? Künstlerroman?
Künstler what?
Künstlerroman? That's a German word?
Künstlerräume.
Oh, okay. I'm not going to
Try again.
Okay.
Again. Künstlerräume.
Künstlerräume.
Okay, it's,
Yeah.
we're getting somewhere.
So it's the coming of it. I won't try your patience, but long story short, put simply, it's a novel about an artist coming into maturity, and this is Steve Costigan trying to become a professional artist, and he ultimately it doesn't work, but this is totally in a. At the very bottom, Roberta Surratt's book, Voyage into Creativity, the Modern Künstlerroman, I've read that, and there's so many different principles of the Künstlerroman that Post-Oaks and Sandra syncs up with. Also, this is a big one, sports as metaphor, sports literature. This is actually kind of a really old literary tradition, going back to the Olympian Odes, when an Olympic athlete would run and win, and then the poet would not only talk about that athlete, they would talk about how that victory symbolized something greater. And we can see Hemingway doing this with bullfighting, right? Sure, he's writing Death in the Afternoon, he's just writing about bullfighting, but he's not just writing about bullfighting, he's also writing about fear and courage. Howard does this with boxing. Boxing in this story is a metaphor for pounding away on the typewriter over and over again. All of his rejections is another hit. It's another hit. Staying in the game. Finally, at one point, the metaphor he says there's no reason to keep fighting because I'm not gonna I'm just gonna. There's a fight in the very beginning between his friend Clive and it ends in kind of an impasse, and I think it forecasts the end of the novel when Steve Costin gives up. But okay, so going on, American naturalism, another long and venerable tradition. This is basically it's a tradition of literature that's very suspicious of our ability to kind of rise through socioeconomic hierarchies. For example, Theodore Dreiser in American Tragedy, he writes, it's kind of one of the famous American naturalist novels. He basically says that the American dream doesn't work. Look at this character, Griffith, who does everything right, and he's still executed at the end by an unjust system. Howard is always, not Howard, I'm sorry. Steve Costigan is very acutely aware of all the people in Lost Plains and his friends and how they can't seem to get a break because of, things out of their control. Social satire. When he becomes a soda jerk at the pharmacy, he's just. There's some venom there. Like he does not care for a lot of I guess you'd call them like bourgeois, like normal folk. He sees them as unimaginative and annoying. They come in, they ask for a soda. He's like, okay, what kind of soda? What flavor? And there's just and he has this really troubled relationship with the oil boom. Steve does, and there's another long his history of criticism on that. Concluding, so just take my word for it. There's lots of evidence of literary naturalism. There's actually that you might find this interesting. There's a scene in Post Oaks where Howard and a bunch of his writer friends, they go to a ranch owned by Sebastian's uncle, and they have a party, a rip-roaring party, and they talk, and they think they are talking about philosophy and stuff, but they get too drunk. That's totally straight out of On the Road, what's called the counterculture novel, or The Sun Also Rises, these young people in the left bank of Paris. It's basically a specific youth group who are rebelling against the world at large, and they usually kind of understand that world as being the property of the older generations. So, blah, 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 philosophical novel. There's other genres. There's a lot of, epistolary novel, for example. It's filled with, he just takes letters and transcribes them in there. So to go back, I have two conclusions. I have one conclusion in academic ease, and basically, genre trouble. When a writer is obviously struggling to find a genre to work, there's a theorist and literary critic named Frederick Jameson, highly respected, who says, whenever writers are struggling to find a genre, that means that there's underlying political, social, and economic uncertainty. Anytime you look in a society, if you're a writer, for example, The Age of Revolution, Robinson Crusoe, it incorporates 20 different genres, right? So it's right at the beginning of the proto-Age of Revolution. He says, and so I see Post Oak and Sans Serifs, this kind of genre-troubled novel as 1929, right? There's some approaching crisis. I feel like it's very important. So let me just say my conclusion and translate it out of academic ease. Post Oaks and Sans Serifs is really dang important. It's amazing work of literary art. It's not a bizarre curio, I should say, a piece of juvenilia. James Joyce wrote A Portrait of the Artist as a young man when he was 31. Howard was writing this at 22. What's 8 years, right? We don't think Portrait of the Artist is juvenilia. And it's not only a source of biographical insight. So read it. It's pretty awesome. So thank you.
Thank you.